welcome to Study Session 7, Clinical Psychology and the Community. Introduction. The most recent revolutionary development in psychology and the mental health fields in general involve a variety of approaches to behavioral and social problems that implicate the community, both as a causative factor and as a potentially therapeutic agent. Clinical psychology as an applied field of general psychology and as a profession has over the years revolutionized its practices and services to reflect the contemporary needs of the people it is meant to serve. This has evolved what is known today as community psychology. The most recent revolutionary development in psychology and the mental health fields in general involves a variety of approaches to behavioral and social problems that implicate the community both as a causative factor and as a potentially therapeutic agent. Clinical psychology as an applied field of general psychology and as a profession has over the years revolutionized its practices and services to reflect the contemporary needs of the people it's meant to serve. This has evolved what is known today as community psychology. In this study, you will learn about community psychology, goals of community psychology, and community psychology and crisis intervention. Learning outcomes. At the end of this study, you should be able to 1. Define the terms of community psychology. 2. Identify the goals of community psychology. 3. Discuss community psychology and crisis intervention. Definition of terms. There are several terms of community psychology. They are community psychology, community psychiatry, social psychiatry, community mental health. A. Community. There are over 100 definitions of this term. It can mean such diverse things as a group of scholars, the scientific community, ethnic groups, the Hausa community, and neighborhoods, the community of farmers. B. Community psychology. This is regarded as an approach to human behavioral problems that emphasizes contributions made to their development by environmental forces as well as the potential contributions to be made towards their alleviation by the use of these forces. C. Community psychiatry. Community psychiatry is the use of community resources in addition to interpersonal and intrapersonal resources to help mentally ill and emotionally disturbed people achieve greater personal and social adequacy. Kaplan, 1965, asserts that community psychiatry deals with entire populations, all age, cultural, and socio-economic groups, whether agency cases or not. He goes further in specifying that part of the preventive function of the community psychiatrist is to collaborate actively with a variety of civic leaders and government administrators in an effort to reshape the structure of the community to make it a psychological healthier place in which to live. D. Social psychiatry. The term social psychiatry usually brings to mind preventive community programs, industrial and forensic psychiatry, group therapy, the participation of psychiatry in administrative medicine, the utilization of the social milieu in treatment, and the study of social factors in the etiology and dynamics of mental illness. This definition places the major emphasis on the application of social psychiatry to a number of psychiatric problems. In summary, however, when social psychiatry is viewed as having a basic applied component, it overlaps considerably with most definitions of community psychiatry. When it is regarded as primarily an area of study and research, social psychiatry maintains a separate existence as a potentially useful contributor to community psychiatry because it is devoted to understanding the effects on individual behavior and the social forces that the community psychiatrist seeks to manipulate. E. Community mental health. Community mental health encompasses all activities which are involved in the discovery, development, and the organization of every facility in a community, which affects all attempts which the community makes to promote mental health and to prevent and control mental illness. Community psychologists are seen as change agents, social system analysts, consultants in community affairs, and students generally of the whole man in relation to all its environments. Since community psychology and other current community approaches are at least in part outgrowths of clinical psychology and psychiatry, the historical roots of these disciplines are to be found in the same soil. Essentially, community psychology may be viewed as a theoretical outlook and a method of practice that has evolved out of clinical psychology. Goals of community psychology. Community psychology has been variously defined since it was founded in Swampscott, Massachusetts in 1965. Community psychology focuses on social issues, social institutions, and other settings that influence groups and organizations as well as individuals in them, with the primary goal being to optimize the well-being of communities and their citizens with innovative and alternative interventions. This definition deserves a closer appraisal. The social issue crucial to this course is mental disorder. Like clinical psychologists, community psychologists are extremely interested in this issue. Community psychology also has a strong interest in other disaffected groups like the homeless, school dropouts, juvenile delinquents, and the elderly because they too are community members. Community psychology focuses on social issues, social institutions, and other settings that influence groups and organizations as well as individuals in them, with the primary goal being to optimize the well-being of communities and their citizens with innovative and alternative interventions. As mentioned in the definition, the primary goal of community psychology is to enhance the well-being of individuals, groups, organizations, and communities. Enhancing well-being is another goal of clinical psychology. Beyond this link, however, clinical and community psychology part ways. Other goals of community psychology include prevention rather than treatment of social problems, examination of extra-personal, that is, environmental and social causes of disordered behavior, and emphasis on empowerment, choices among available interventions and treatments, and the development of a sense of community. The prevention goal. Community psychologists rely on community-level interventions such as education and alteration of the environment to reduce the likelihood of mental disorders. One method of achieving this is through mental health education. In this type of education, people acquire knowledge, skills, and attitudes that directly contribute to their mental health and to their effect on the mental health of others. The purpose of mental health education is to teach people how to think instead of just instructing them what to think. In this way, people learn to make responsible choices and decisions and to feel a sense of responsibility for their own well-being. In other words, mental health education ensures the ability to think well, which paves the way for emotional relief, which in turn prevents dysfunction. Kaplan, 1964, distinguished between three types of preventive efforts: primary efforts, secondary efforts, tertiary prevention efforts. Primary prevention efforts are geared towards reducing the incidence of mental disorders of all types in the community. These prevention programs could be targeted at high-risk groups who are particularly vulnerable to emotional and behavioral disorders before the problem even starts, such as adolescents, children from broken homes, divorced or bereaved, retirees, and so on. For instance, education about healthy and safe habits, For example, eating well, exercising regularly, not smoking. Secondary prevention is an effort geared towards reducing the prevalence of mental disorders by shortening the duration, reducing the symptoms, limiting the consequences, and minimizing their effects on others. In this way, partial prevention is achieved through early diagnosis and effective treatment of individuals who exhibit signs of emotional disturbance. For instance, regular exams and screening tests to detect diseases in its early stages. For example, mammograms to detect breast cancer. Tertiary prevention is aimed at limiting the disability and promoting the rehabilitation of individuals with mental disorders. By returning such individuals to their productive capacity as quickly as possible, the social and occupational life of the community is improved. For instance, cardiac or stroke rehabilitation programs, chronic diseases management programs, for example, diabetes, arthritis, depression, and so on. The goal of ecological perspective. Community psychologists are highly interested in the person-environment fit, the suitability of the person to the setting and the setting to the person. To assure such fit, an ecological perspective is extremely important. This perspective recognizes that there exists a transaction between people and setting. Individuals influence the settings in which they find themselves. Settings influence the individuals in them. Establishing an optimal match between the individual and the environment is a goal of community psychology. In this way, they eschew labeling people who do not fit well into a particular setting as misfits. Simply, they avoid controlling the environment simply to control the individual in it. Empowerment. This is the process of enhancing the possibility that people can more actively control their own lives. In other words, community psychologists try to keep people from feeling powerless. However, the service to individuals is indirect. Rather, they provide the tools, environment, and information that engender collaboration so that affected individuals can do things for themselves. Choices among alternative interventions. As part of the recognition of uniqueness and diversity, community psychologists recognize that one intervention or one community service probably will not help all individuals equally well. So, they seek to establish a number of alternative services in various communities in recognition of the diversity in our communities. As part of this diversity of population and services, community psychologists also concur that accessibility is of utmost importance. A service that is not readily available has no client base. A sense of community. Research has demonstrated that subjective sense of well-being is often positively related to the sense of community or the sense of belonging in the community. Sense of community is the feeling of the relationship an individual holds for his or her community. Specifically, sense of community includes a perception of similarity to others in the community, a willingness to maintain and acknowledge interdependence with others, and a feeling that one is part of a larger, dependable, and stable structure. Community and sense of community relate to mental health in a number of ways. Firstly, alternative care for the mentally disordered typically involves settings in which a smaller number of clients are served compared to a large number served by the psychiatric hospital. One might conclude that such smaller settings result in a greater sense of community and or a greater sense of self-efficacy. Secondly, some communities do not want alternative facilities in their neighborhoods. Community residents give many reasons for rejecting alternative services such as psychosocial clubs and group homes. Because residents usually have very little information about mental illness and therefore stereotype and stigmatize the mentally ill as dangerous, the residents fear that patients will commit crimes or will be inadequately supervised by the staff. Other residents may feel if they accept one such service, other such services will follow, and thus property value may decrease. Community psychology and crisis intervention. Have you ever seen someone in crisis before? A crisis is provoked when a person faces an obstacle to important life goals that is for a time insurmountable through the utilization of the customary methods of problem solving. Typically, the crisis situation is followed by a period of disorganization and emotional upset, during which the individual makes various abortive attempts at the situation. Crises are produced by two sources of stress. One source of stress can consist of external events such as death in the family, natural disaster, sudden loss of job, and so on. The second source of stress is related to internal conditions such as desire to commit suicide, acute alcoholism, depression, and so on. The most common type of crisis is associated with loss or impending loss of a loved one, a prized job, health, or physical strength. Crises associated with situations such as death are of short duration, especially if the normal grief process has ensued. Developmental or existential types of crises such as going off to school, entering the army, or facing a conflict choice are usually more prolonged. Kubler-Ross, 1975, has described the 5 stages persons facing death go through: denial and isolation, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. The task of the clinical and community psychologist is to help patients or clients walk through these stages at the same time helping them to regain their pre-crisis psychological well-being through crisis intervention. As psychologists have begun to think in community mental health terms, it has become evident that changes must be made both in how clinical services are traditionally delivered and what populations are customarily served. If the focus is to be on prevention, early detection, and rapid intervention to help individuals maintain themselves in their communities, local programs must be established to provide inexpensive, easily accessible, short-term treatment aimed directly at resolving immediate problems. Therefore, community psychologists must be concerned with crisis detection, intervention, and resolution. Summary for study session. In this study session, you have learned that 1. Community psychiatry. Take 2. 1. Community psychiatry is the use of community resources in addition to interpersonal and intrapersonal resources to help maintain ill and emotionally disturbed people achieve greater personal and social adequacy. 2. Community mental health encompasses all activities which are involved in the discovery, development, and organization of every facility in a community, which affects all attempts which a community makes to promote mental health and to prevent and control mental illness. 3. Community psychology focuses on social issues, social institutions, and other settings that influence groups and organizations as well as individuals in them, with the primary goal being to optimize the well-being of communities and their citizens with innovative and alternative interventions. 4. A crisis is provoked when a person faces an obstacle to important life goals that is for a time insurmountable through the utilization of the customary methods of problem solving. We have come to the end of study session 7. Thank you.